Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. So my name's Kieran Stevens, and on behalf of Williams Medical, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this webinar on Leading Beyond the Practice, Mastering Neighbourhood Systems. So in this session, we're going to talk about influencing beyond your organisation, how to build strong system relationships, navigating shared accountability, and also how to position your practice effectively within integrated models. So this webinar is the 7th in our practice support series and is presented in partnership with the Institute of Health and Social Care Management. We are delighted to welcome John Wilks, Chief Executive Officer of the Institute today. So thanks for joining us once again, John. And just before you introduce yourself, a couple of bits in terms of housekeeping. So we have 1 hour scheduled for this webinar. We'd like to invite your questions and comments throughout the session. So if you do have a question, please use the chat function. Like I said earlier, this should just be at the top of your screen. And in terms of recording, this session will be recorded and will be available on our platforms shortly after the session. And we'll also include some useful resources as part of our post-event communication. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to John to start the session.
Kieran, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Lovely to have so many with you, with me today. I do have a little bit of a frog in the throat. I do have a little bit of a cold, so you'll forgive me if I need to break at any stage just to have a quick cough to myself. Please don't judge me. It's just one of those things. But it's lovely to have the opportunity to talk to you about this neighbourhood systems and so on. And I could bore you rigid. I could take you through all of the neighbourhood health system kind of project and such, like I'll take you through all the pamphlets and reports and heaven knows what else been produced. You'll all be familiar with this kind of stuff, the Fit for Future 10-year health plan from NHS England, and we are talking about England specifically for that. The fact that within the 10-year health plan, we talk about neighbourhood health services and the idea that we're trying to go from hospital to community and such like as part of the 3 foundations, just in the interests of making sure that you are all sort of fundamentally across what neighbourhood health systems are suggesting. The outline of it is as follows. There we go. This is the last, by the way, text slide that I'm going to put up today. I really have a deep-seated loathing for Microsoft and particularly PowerPoint. I think it's the devil's own invention in terms of presentation media, but there we are. We're obliged to use it for today. That's neighbourhood health in a nutshell. They talk about integration, prevention, personalised care, care delivered closer to home, community-led approaches to care, and place-based care, as if you wonderful people had not been right across this for all of your careers. I mean, I can trace this back years and years and years, where anybody who's been doing a half-decent job within the primary care environment has known all about the importance of neighbourhood health systems. You've done it intuitively, because you understand that you need alliances, you need partnerships, you need links with people who are going to enable you to do what you do in primary care, but you understand that you're part of a system. And that's the bit that I think is the most important element for us to just briefly share with one another. That I regard neighbourhood health systems as kind of a bit like the human body. There's all these interactions, interdependencies, interfaces, where if you get any one bit of this going wrong, the kind of whole body very rapidly falls over and you start to feel rather poorly. I think it's a really nice way of looking at the whole business of neighbourhood health systems, but most importantly of all, the health and care system as an entirety. The idea that, you know, and unfortunately we've had this perhaps with ICBs over the recent past in England to some extent, in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, in their similar sorts of entities. We've had this idea that it's health and care is all really built around the acute hospital sector, and that the rest of us pay this kind of service to this hub and spoke model. Right in the middle is the really serious stuff, the acute hospital. And I think really what neighbourhood health systems are is an effort to just do away with that modus operandi. It's to start to understand, appreciate, and respect the importance that all the aspects provide for the delivery of care and well-being in a community of whatever type it may be. So I just thought that's kind of a nice way to start ourselves off there. I thought it might be interesting for us to kind of move on from the sort of formulate report-based government-issued kind of reports and processes and pathways and so on, and say, how does system leadership translate in everyday behavior and language that we could all appreciate? Because I guess the biggest challenge for most of you on the call today is not to understand what health systems are. It's to figure out, how do you develop relationships with people across local authorities, the acute sector, mental health, community nursing, domiciliary care, residential care, the charity sector, so that actually you're all kind of linked together. You are operating in a common system that you all acknowledge what it's trying to achieve. And I thought maybe one of the things we could do is to start off looking at a book called Systems Leadership by MacDonald, Burke and Stewart, relatively recently published. This is really created around the world of health and social care. And I wonder whether you might like to have a bit of a think about, what do you reckon the 6 universal values are, according to MacDonald, Burke and Stewart, by which we create and sustain relationships with people whom we are seeking to develop strategic alliances with. Anybody got any idea? You're welcome to use the chat, or you can unmute, and I'd be delighted to hear your dulcet tones and so on. But what do you reckon the 6 universal values might be? And just to be really clear, as Kieran explained at the beginning, this is an interactive session. You are very welcome to interact with me, even if you might only think of one of these universal values. Would anybody like to have a go? I'm looking at the chat screen as we go along, so please feel free to use that, or as I say, unmute. What do you reckon? Universal values. What do we all consider when we meet somebody for the first time, and then deduce from that whether they are worthy of our working with them or not? Sliding scale of stuff. We're kind of constantly looking at all of this. Are you all snoozing? Maybe you're all eating your lunch and you're incapable of speech at this stage. Mouthful of cheese and onion sandwich or something like that. Shall I help? Are you all wanting me to shut up, John, and just tell us? Is that the way that this is going to go? Oh, thank you, Luke. Okay, so Cofton Medical. So where's Cofton, Luke? I'm not sure. I've heard of Cofton. Is it up in the northwest somewhere? South Birmingham. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so you say honesty and integrity, to a certain degree openness. That's interesting. That's a good start. That is, an element of that is within this, I'm happy to say. Anybody else want to have a bash? Diana's typing at the moment. Or feel free to unmute. Just put your hand up so I can come to you. Don't mind. There's a lot of typing going on. So we've got mutual respect from Diana. That's nice. Compassion from Niroshan. Big topic that. I was doing a big session last week at University Hospitals Leicester all around compassionate leadership. Went very well. Shall I show you? These are the 6 universal values that MacDonald, Burke and Stewart reckon in respect of systems leadership. So they say, first of all, well done, Luke, by the way, on this. They are other people with whom you are trying to engage, to interact, to create these relationships. The first thing that they're assessing is, are you honest enough for them to want to be able to believe what you say and therefore feel that you're going to be open and honest with them? To what extent do they feel they can trust you? To what extent do they believe that you have courage? To what extent do they believe that you are prepared to respect them and they might respect you? To what extent do they believe that you are fair? And the final one, this love thing, please don't get sidelined by the idea of love. It's more aligned with Niroshan's idea of compassion. So are you prepared to be somebody that they can place a bit of emotional faith in? Are you kind? Do they think you're going to respect them? Do you think you're going to be generous and so on in terms of your spirits, that kind of stuff? Okay. So I think this is important in the context of what we're discussing around neighbourhood health systems, because your big challenge is not to understand what neighbourhood health systems are, it's to figure out how do you go about fostering relationships with people across your traditional boundaries. That's going to be the key to this if it's going to work properly. Okay, moving along from there, I think we've got 3 key questions that you would need to ask people with whom you want to engage across your system boundaries. Number 1, then, you need to establish with them, what are you aiming to do? Forgive me, it was the most straightforward picture I could possibly think of. But you have to decide, where are your priorities? There's no point in looking at the whole gamut of neighbourhood health, considering a population perhaps of 50, 60,000 people, and trying to do everything in one go with a group of people who you've perhaps brought together as part of this national neighbourhood health system. The first thing to do is to agree, let's establish what our priorities are. Let's establish the key things that we're aiming to do, whereby we can make the biggest difference to people whom we serve. The second thing, I love this picture. This is well, anybody know what this is? What's this a photograph of? If I say LHC, there's a big clue. It is the Hadron. It's the Large Hadron Collider. Well done, Luke and Agni. Yeah, this is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. And one of the things that obviously they sought there to be very precise about what they're aiming to do. The fact they built the blessed thing, and I don't know whether any of you ever visited there and had the opportunity to look around it, but it's just jaw-dropping the extent to which they decided, we're trying to figure out what happens when particles collide. What's the best way we can do this? We can build this enormous circle, miles and miles long, buried underground, and then we can smash particles into each other and figure out how we're going to do it. They said that is the only way we're going to be able to do it. Anyway, that's that. Next thing, how will you measure success? So remember, they're the 3 things. What are we aiming to do? How are we aiming to achieve it? And how will we measure success? The 3 key questions, certainly across the systems, leadership, techniques, collaboration. That's what you're aiming to do, that you're getting together with people to determine the answer to those questions. Most of you are now thinking, what the heck is that a photograph of? Would anybody like to speculate? By the way, I'll give you a clue. It's in Wales. And yes, it is a stadium. But there's something about this that I think you might find interesting. Everybody's so jaw-dropped by the fact that this photograph has been put up. But if you really did zoom in really close, guess who you'd see there? You'd see me. I'm a member of the choir there on the pitch. That's Cowbridge Male Voice Choir. This is the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. And we were invited for the first time in our 55 years to sing on the pitch at the men's Rugby Six Nations match, Italy versus Wales, the last of this season's Six Nations. I'm on the end towards the left-hand side there. I'll use my cursor to just give you a little bit of a point. That's me just there. And you might be saying, what's this all about? This was a project 4 years in the making that we decided as a choir we wanted to try to sing on the pitch. We didn't just want to do any match, we wanted to do something in the men's Six Nations. And suffice to say, the measurement that we used for our success was the fact that we got invited by the Welsh Rugby Union in December last year to sing on the pitch in March this year. I just thought it would gladden your heart a little bit, because let me tell you, it was the most extraordinary experience of any of our lives. So they're the 3 questions. We talked about the 6 universal values by which you create relationships. The 3 key questions: what are we trying to achieve? How are we trying to achieve it? And how will we measure success? If you can form a collective, unified understanding of what the answers to those 3 questions are, then I would suggest to you, you are at least in the foothills of being successful in respect of a neighbourhood health system evolution. This gentleman is probably somebody that you need to understand about. By the way, he's a bit of a taciturn individual. He wouldn't mind me saying that. I have met him once. I was quite impressed with him, but he's not necessarily the biggest sense of humour kind of an individual. Let's put it that way. His name's Dave Snowden, and in 1999 he evolved something called the Cynefin framework. Are any of you familiar with this? Have you heard of the Cynefin framework? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on whether you have or not. I don't want to go over ground if you already know it. Let's put it that way. All right. Well, he came up with the idea of the Cynefin framework. And just so I can explain it to you, Cynefin is a Welsh word. It means habitat loosely. There's not a precise translation for it. And really what he was trying to do is to make sense of the situation that people typically find themselves in organizational environments. And the reason this is important is if we can understand what situation they're in, we're better able to understand and empathize and help them, so that we're seen as a supporter, an ally for them in respect of developing the neighborhood health system. So let's look at the Cynefin model very quickly. Okay, it's split into 4. Okay, Dave Snowden says that most of us, most of the time, we're down in this simple zone. Okay, our daily lives are relatively straightforward. We've got a good idea what's going to come across our threshold at any one point in time. We are sensing what the needs are. We're categorizing on a relatively straightforward system, and we're responding as we know we ordinarily respond. We're typically able to call upon best practice as a result of that. And kind of, I'm not suggesting that life is easy, but it's ordered. We know what's going on typically on a daily basis across our primary care network. Perhaps we're kind of clear about it. No surprises. Okay. However, occasionally we might need to shift our environment into the complicated zone. So this is where you've got stuff happening that is a little unusual. It's outside of your typical expertise. You may need to call in experts to help you with it, who've got specific knowledge and expertise to help you with it. You're sensing what's required, you're analysing and responding. But because it's slightly unusual, you're probably using good practice rather than best practice. Example of this might be something like, I don't know, maybe you're introducing a new electronic patient record system or something like that. Or you're designing a new way how you're going to share data across a neighbourhood system. And you're trying to evolve the systems and the understanding that you're all going to need in respect of this to make it happen effectively. Is that okay? But understanding that if you've got a collaborator who's in that situation, you probably need to interact with them differently to if they're just in a simple environment is an important consideration. Then third, if we go across here, we've got some of your allies, some of the people with whom you're looking to work. They may be in a complex environment. They may not have, let's for example say, they may not have precise understanding of their budgets. They may be plunged into a situation where they're wondering how on earth they can actually address some of the challenges that are facing them at some point in time. Typically they're probing, they're sensing, they're responding. They're probably doing a lot of experiments, a lot of research. They're trying stuff, seeing if it works. If it works, great, keep it. If it doesn't work, that's fine. You know, we'll jettison it. But they're dealing with a complex environment. And then finally, we've got this chaotic environment where people are typically looking at what's going on and they're thinking, God, I just don't know what to do. We're being plunged into a really difficult environment. We're probably panicking a little bit. We're having to act, sense, and respond. And this is novel practice at best that we're able to deal with. I think the easiest kind of parallel with this would be something like COVID or something like that. But just to kind of help with this, there's simple. So the parallel I would use, it's kind of a straightforward pigeonhole sort of an environment. Your systems are all set up, your responses are all set up, you receive requests from the people that you serve, you put them into pigeonholes, off we go. It's really straightforward. The next one, the complicated, this might well be the evolution of a new EPR system, something like Epic or something of that nature, where you're bringing in external expertise, you're kind of finding your feet with it. It's a bit of a challenge for everybody because it's kind of new and it's different and you've changed the way you're doing things, but it'll be okay if you've got the right kind of expertise available. The third thing then, complex, this might be something like AI, I was thinking, or the advent of digital technology in your practices where you're having to do a lot of complicated diagnostics, you're having to embrace the idea of new ways of doing things, engaging with patients and so on. And then finally, without dwelling on this too much, you've got something like the chaotic. And I remember back 2000 and it was 2016, 2017. You remember the WannaCry cyber attack on the NHS? May well have affected some of you. I remember it well. I was in Lincolnshire on that particular day, going to Lincoln General Hospital, and there was a big flip chart in the reception area saying, do not turn on your PC. I'm sure if you were part of it, you remember it. In those situations, you know, there is a degree of panic. You don't really know what to do, and you're kind of making it up as you go along. I hope that's helpful. The reason, excuse me, the reason I've put it all up there is your ability to understand and empathize with the situation that the people that you're seeking to collaborate with, you demonstrating that you understand what they're going through and even offering some help in that regard is a really important means by which you might wish to win their trustworthiness, respect, love even. Get the idea? All happy with that? Don't want to go into it in too much detail. If you want to go on YouTube and Google it or come on one of the Institute's more modular system leadership classes, you can learn a lot more about that and how it's applied. I thought this was an important thing for us to get across. Any of you familiar with the Everett Rogers Law of Diffusion of Innovation, 1962? Why do you think this might be important for us in the context of system leadership? There's an interesting question. Why would this be important for us to understand in the context of neighbourhood health system leadership that any of you might be involved with? And let's say that some of you, you're all primary care, I think, predominantly in the call today. Let's say that you are intending to get a team together to collaborate on a specific priority that you want to set yourselves. You know that you're going to have to work with colleagues in local authority. You know that you're going to have to work with colleagues in community nursing, perhaps the acute sector. You're probably going to have to work with colleagues, I don't know, in mental health perhaps, or domiciliary care, something like that. Perhaps district nursing, community nursing. Get the idea? How do we go about making change work for us? That's what this is about. Anybody, and have you come across this before? Please give me some kind of indication that I'm making some degree of sense to you. Get in early, Luke says, lead or be led. Kind of, Luke. I think it's this. The NHS keeps making this mistake that it comes up with brand new, fabulous ideas like, as it would call it, neighbourhood health systems. And it thinks that when it produces a report and says, and this is going to go live a week on Thursday, that somehow everybody concerned with it will all go, great, I'm in. And then they wonder why 6 months down the line, it hasn't really worked. So you look back to the birth of integrated care systems and integrated care boards, why haven't they had the kind of impact that NHS England were expecting? I would suggest you it's because NHS England didn't build in the formula for the law of diffusion of innovation. They thought everybody would go whoopee and start at the particular appointed time. And of course, it doesn't work like that. Typically, what you have when you start a project is you've got the innovators, typically 2.5% of your average organization's people. These are your pioneers. They are not risk averse at all. They believe in you. They are innovation positive. If you look for people to have a go at something new, these are your people. You'll know who they are in your own organizations who will say, I'm prepared to have a crack at that, without really giving it any huge thought. Okay? So they are your pioneers. By the way, if you find them, if you know who they are, make a bit of a fuss of them. They're wonderful people to have on your teams. What you've then got is you've got your early adopters. Okay? And these are the people that are just checking to make sure that no harm has come to the innovators. And then they're also nice and energetic and innovation positive, and then they'll come in quite quickly as well. Assuming that no harm comes to them, then you'll get the early majority, about 34% of people looking at all of this. And they think, do you know what? This looks safe enough. I'm in as well. Do the maths. If all of those people come in, you're now at 50%. You're at the tip point whereby your new way of doing things, your change that you're asking people to embrace, has got half a chance of success. Okay? If we do that, then you can expect the late majority to come in, who are predominantly motivated by fear of missing out. Okay? Fear of missing out. That's what the late majority are motivated by, but they will eventually come in. And then you're left about 16% the laggards. These are not necessarily bad people. They may once have been innovators or early adopters. Maybe they got burnt in a particular project that they were keen to be seen to lead in the past. But what we've got a situation is now these are people who are reluctant to get involved until they absolutely have to. That line along the bottom is time. In other words, anybody with half a grain of sense, if you're trying to get a group of people to embrace a new way of doing things, you would understand that this bell curve demands that you are patient above all else. Where would you suggest that you spend the bulk of your time? If you're going to be the change catalyst, the agent for change, where would you spend the bulk of your time, do you think? This is particularly important. If you're trying to set up a neighbourhood health system approach, this is really important for you. So I would hope you're going to look at the innovators and early adopters, okay? If you're smart, that's where you spend the bulk of your time. You find your positive, go-to, high engagement, high trust, low risk aversion people, and you encourage them to go first, have a go at it so that you develop some kind of project momentum, okay? And then you go, obviously the rest of it will follow along as you go through it, okay? I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just think it's an important thing for us to be mindful of. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of asset-based community development, because I think it's a cornerstone of what will be neighbourhood health systems going forward. Are any of you familiar with this? Do you know what we're talking about when we talk about asset-based community development? Have any of you across this in your own practices? Are you involved in this at any level? I'd be really interested if somebody is. Is it a complete new thing for you all? That's interesting. I'm assuming it is in that case. Well, look, we know about it in the Institute because we've worked hard with housing associations in particular, or social prescribers, that kind of stuff, where they look at not what you can do to the community, but how you can help the community to help itself and start to address some of these challenges around public health, stopping people getting poorly in the first place, creating genuine community spirit, creating an environment in which people can thrive and flourish. Antisocial behavior gets pushed to one side and so on. It's all of that kind of activity. It's finding strength in communities and helping people who want to step forward as innovators or early adopters to come in and do something worthwhile in those communities with your help. I think the best example I've got of this is Sir Sam Everington in Tower Hamlets. I think we've got someone from Barking, haven't we, here today? Oh, it's Nirishan. You're from Barking, Nirishan. You heard of Sir Sam Everington? He's not terribly far away from you in Tower Hamlets, in East Ham and so on. And did anybody know what Sir Sam was all about? What did he do? I'm going back probably early 2000s here. What did Sir Sam do? What was he the architect of? No? So if I talk about social prescribing, are any of you involved in that? Doing social prescribing? Yes. Excellent, Nirishan. Okay, so you'd be familiar with this, I hope. If we're talking asset-based community development, it's around this social prescribing idea that Sir Sam pioneered to start with in Tower Hamlets, where he said, do you know what? There's no point in me just sitting in my general practice environment trying to look after the myriad of people who come through our doors every day. You know, the demand is overwhelming. We're not able to interact with the people in the way they want to be interacted with. We need a new model. And he really advocated for the development of what was basically a community hub in Tower Hamlets. I don't know whether any of you have visited it, but it was this idea that let's get in one place all of the things that could help people to feel well without having to prescribe them pills and potions. So on site in Tower Hamlets at Sir Sam's practice, you've got things like housing associations, you've got debt counsellors, you've got domestic abuse advice, you've got language facilitators for people in what is a very diverse community. You've got people who are helping with reading and writing skills and that kind of stuff. Am I making sense here? In other words, you're trying to help the community, the neighbourhood, to make a success of itself. And I think that's a critical part of this neighbourhood systems approach that's being advocated. Okay, let's move along. Nirishan, I'm so glad that you were knowledgeable about that. I've come to this slide, which means that Kieran's about to take over in a moment or two. So I'm just going to stop sharing, because what I'd like to do first is ask any of you, have you got any questions about your role in neighbourhood health services? Have any of you got any advice requests that you might have in terms of how you go about forging these relationships that you're going to need if you're going to advance your practice in respect of taking some kind of a lead role in the neighbourhood health systems in your area? Would anybody like to ask any questions at all or make any comments? Because what I've been trying to do is talk to you about, I think you're all intelligent people. You know what neighbourhood health systems are. I'm trying to give you some idea of how you develop relationships, how you build trust, some of the systems that you can look to indulge in, some of the relationships that you can choose to build, some of the models that you might need to be aware of so that you can make sure people feel engaged, trusted, and that kind of stuff in your company. Is that okay? Well, that's what I've worked at. If nobody's got any comments at this stage, Kieran, may I hand over to you? I know we're a little bit early, but that's no.
It's okay. I'm happy to ask a question, John, as well. So in terms of like what we're talking about, building relationships in new neighbourhood systems, I guess as a takeaway from this event, what's the sort of one practical action you'd encourage everyone on this call to take over the sort of next couple of weeks or months to sort of help them build stronger relationships?
Well, first of all, I reckon most of the people on this call, they will have been doing what neighbourhood health systems are asking of them anyway. I would suspect we've got really good practices who are on this call, really experienced practice managers on this call. Most of you will have been developing relationships for years across your neighborhood. So this is not new. It's just a kind of a formalization, perhaps, of what you've been doing. And I think, if I may suggest, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you break it into bite-sized chunks. You don't try to eat it all at once. I think to go back to those three questions of, let's be clear about what your priorities are in terms of what you would like to achieve with your collaborators and colleagues across the various systems. Let's agree some kind of unified approach in respect of how we're going to achieve it. And let's be clear about how we're going to measure success. So once you've got that set up with a group of people who are committed and united in trying to achieve it, then I think you've got a really strong basis on which to go forward. I mean, I've got a couple of examples. I know I use Tower Hamlets, but if you look up in Fleetwood at the hub up in Fleetwood, Fleetwood's a pretty deprived part of the northwest of England. It's pretty remote as well geographically. Once a bastion of the English fishing fleet and so on, but pretty tough times today if you do go and go up to Fleetwood. What have they developed? They've developed a community hub up there, again, that comprises primary care, mental health, debt counselling, all the stuff that they're doing in Tower Hamlets. It's been copied up in Fleetwood. They've created a community interest company, and they've lobbied and collected from the council and other providers a space that was an old hospital. They've converted into what is now the most fantastic community hub up there. So people feel in control of their own health and well-being destiny. They can come along there, irrespective of their age, social circumstances, economic circumstances, and they know that they'll be listened to, they know they'll get help and so on. But that was all created in Fleetwood because a group of smart people from all of the different elements, primary care, mental health, local authorities, the tertiary sector, charity sector, they got together and said, let's just bring us all together. Let's kind of find a way by which, for the community, we've got one kind of access point where they can get to all of us. And it's proved hugely successful, I can tell you. So that's what I would go on. Long answer to a short question, Kieran. Find your people with whom you want to collaborate, agree with them. What's the priority thing we would like to create within this neighborhood? And then move heaven and earth to agree, what is it we're trying to achieve? How are we going to achieve it? And how are we going to measure success? And be really transparent with the neighborhood, with the community about that, and you'll get a lot of support for it.
Brilliant, thank you. A long answer, John, but a really good one. So thank you for that.
Shall I put up the share again? Do you want to go to your slides, Kieran?
Yes, please. Just while John is doing that, I just want to say, thank you to John. Some very thought-provoking points throughout that session and some really good guidance. I'm sure everyone will agree. As John said, we've still got some time on the session. So if you've got a question that you've just thought of or you've not yet submitted, please enter it into the chat and we'll get through as many as time allows before the end of the session. It's just a couple of points. So I'm really pleased that we'll be delivering more education throughout 2026. So please keep an eye out on our social media and our webinar registration page for future events. I've just popped some of our upcoming sessions in the chat. Keep an eye on that page, and as attendees of this session, you'll also be notified of these future events. The good news, throughout some of the potential change that we've discussed today, Williams Medical will be here to support you as one of the leading partners for healthcare professionals in primary care. So we are dedicated to supporting your everyday, both from a service perspective and also through added value and education, as we've been able to deliver in partnership with John and the IHSCM today. You could pop the next slide on, please, John.
Kieran, can I just interrupt for a moment? Because Nirashan's put a question in. He said, what common challenges in your local NHS neighbourhood in terms of integration between services? And Nirashan, that's such a good question. I have a ready-made answer. The biggest challenge I think that most of you, I suspect, come across is trust or absence of it. That actually, you know, in the past, certainly from an ICB perspective, I don't know what it's like in Barking. I haven't had the pleasure of spending a lot of time there. But what tended to be the case when the integrated care boards and integrated care systems were created is the acute hospital sector leaders took the prime roles. And it was just same old, same old. You know, they were put at the epicenter of everything. And people like primary care, mental health, community services, community nursing, domiciliary care, social services, education, public health, you know, that was all in the foothills. The summit was occupied by the acute sector, by the hospital sector. And I think what the neighbourhood health effort is really all about, it's just a recalibration of that, to say, do you know what, that is not really what we wanted in terms of integrated care boards, because there was very little genuine integration that took place as a result of that. And I suspect that's why NHS England certainly have gone back to the drawing board and said, do you know what, we need to have a much better integrated approach. If you're going to get integrated, you have to go back to those 6 universal values, and you've got to figure out, how do we forge relationships worthy of the name across these interfaces, across these boundaries, where previously people have probably been pretty defensive, been pretty selfish, dare I say it, and actually you've worried about the extent to which you even want to work across those boundaries, because some of the individuals, you know, may not necessarily have your best interests at heart. So I think that's why I would go back to the idea of build relationships, build trust, build engagement, and go back to this idea of, once you've found a team of people whom you think you can work with, you think you can trust each other, then just empower everybody to have some autonomy and say, do you know what, let's agree what we're trying to achieve as a priority, let's agree how we're going to achieve it, and let's agree how we're going to measure success, and you go from there. But, you know, putting aside this historical mistrust, I think, is probably the biggest challenge. But you know what, be the big person, be prepared to say, I'd just like to get on and try again with this. Have a go, be seen to be vulnerable, be seen to admit your fallibilities, and see what happens as a result of that. I think you'll get a positive response, Niroshan. Thank you for your question. Okay, I'll put the next slide up for you, Kieran.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Niroshan, for that question as well. So yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that you can earn rewards every time you shop with Williams Plus. This is our reward scheme at Williams Medical, and this applies to products in our disposables, pharmaceutical and equipment categories, as well as our medical services. You can find out more about your eligibility and enroll by visiting the website on the screen there, wms.co.uk/Williams Plus. If you could pop the next slide on as well, John. So I'll just give everyone another couple of minutes to see if there's any questions that we want to go through.
Thank you, Niroshan. You're a good man.
Thank you, Niroshan.
Could I just mention one thing? All of you on the call today, this neighbourhood health system thing is going to happen. Okay. You can be a bystander and have it done to you, or you can be a participant and choose to design, develop and implement the neighbourhood model that will work for you. I think that's a really important choice for each of you to make, really. As I say, if you've been in the NHS for any particular length of time, you'll know what it feels like to have stuff done to you, and the NHS is very good at doing that, just implements change and expects you to crack on with it. I think you can make a choice with these neighbourhood health systems to get involved with the design, development and implementation, and I would encourage you all to do so. But you're going to have to develop these relationships across boundaries that you might not necessarily have considered in the past.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. So I don't think we have any questions further on. So this is my final call. So I'll bring the session to a close. So yeah, once again, thank you, John, and thank you all to those who have joined us online today. We'll be following up with some resources from the session over the coming days. And yeah, please don't hesitate to contact us if you need any support. We look forward to seeing you on more webinars, including our practice support series throughout the year. So yeah, on behalf of me and John, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you all have a great day.